Hi there, I'm Athul Vats, and welcome to the very first episode of Ask Dr. Vats. Hopefully this is going to be the first of many episodes that we'll be doing. Today I'm starting with a very close friend who is the mastermind behind all of this and has helped me create this idea, this venture. Please welcome my Brazilian brother, Marcios Guilaro, also known as Ma. Ma and I have been friends for 17 years since our boys were 4 years old and started playing baseball together. It was a little odd. We are fairly certain we are twins that were born 10 years apart on two different continents, but somehow we have developed a really good friendship over the years. We are recording here in Sao Paulo, Brazil, in Ma's studio, and created this studio for our first podcast. Hopefully we'll be doing this soon in Atlanta.
What do you do professionally?
What do I do nowadays professionally? Okay, well, I completed my MBA last year from Emory in 2023, and since then took a position with a company called Pediatrics Medical Group, ticker symbol MD. And with them, I'm a consultant and a pediatric ICU medical director. We opened a pediatric ICU at Wellstar Kennestone Hospital in Marietta, Georgia. It's a 6-bed pediatric ICU, the first community pediatric ICU in the Atlanta, Georgia metro area. I'm also working as a consultant doing other ventures as well. For example, I'm going to be starting as a tele-ICU doc, a pediatric tele-ICU doc. And I'm also involved as a advisory board member for a medical device company, a new medical device company.
Why a pediatric ICU doctor?
Yeah, it's a very good question. Why did I become a pediatric intensive care unit doctor, and how did I get there? It's actually a bit of a circuitous story. It was not a straight path. Growing up in Kansas as the son of a pediatric hematologist oncologist, I was somewhat guided, mentored by my father to go into medicine. So I went into medical school. Initially thought I was going to do internal medicine, but then changed to pediatrics. When I finished my pediatric training, I did not feel like I was educated enough to go out and practice. I felt I needed to learn more. I thought I was going to do cardiology, and so I interviewed for cardiology fellowships, but found that folks were doing 3 more years of training to be pediatric cardiologists and were having difficulty finding jobs. And that's when I discovered critical care medicine, or working in the intensive care unit. It was a relatively new specialty at that point. I believe the boards for that specialty only began in the late 80s, and I graduated medical school in 1991. I initially only applied for critical care programs where there was also cardiology training, thinking that I was going to do both, but really fell in love with taking care of kids in the intensive care unit, and have been doing that since I finished my training in, I'm going to date myself, in 1998. So I've been a pediatric ICU doctor since 1998.
What's the average week or life of a pediatric ICU doctor?
Yeah, so what is the average week like for a pediatric ICU doctor, or me? And one thing I can tell you is there is no such thing as an average week. A pediatric ICU is open 24/7, 365. There are no normal business hours. So much like an ER physician works shifts, an ICU doctor can work shifts. However, we do more daytime shifts than we do night. So my current lifestyle with my practice is a 3-physician practice group where we do 24-hour shifts. However, we will do the 24-hour shifts multiple days in a row. For example, 4 days in a row, I will be on service in the pediatric ICU. It'll be in-house at the hospital from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. and then call from home, being responsive and having to come in to see the patients, but needing to be on cognitively involved with the patients for several days in a row. And the days that I'm not on service, I can schedule administrative and academic educational meetings. But for me, it's fitness first. If I am not going into work first thing in the morning, I'm trying to figure out how to get to the gym or yoga or walk my dog, but some sort of physical activity to begin the day, and then start getting involved with my day-to-day academic and educational activities.
What do you like to do in your free time?
Yes, what do I like to do in my free time? Well, as the father of two sons, for a long time when they were young, I had very little free time. As they get older, I do have more free time. They are 20 and 15 now, so they don't necessarily need dad around all the time, and sometimes may not want dad around. So my vices are fitness and travel. I absolutely love to travel. I prefer international travel over domestic travel, but get me on a plane and I want to see new people, new cultures, and learn. I'm very focused on fitness and sports. I do love to work out. I've recently become obsessed with hot yoga. Growing up, I played ice hockey. That was my sport. In Atlanta, we don't have an ice hockey team, so it's hard to follow ice hockey now. I've raised boys that lived on ESPN, and they are sports junkies. So I have tried to limit my obsession to just two teams and two sports. I love the Kansas City Chiefs and NFL football, and I love my Kansas Jayhawks basketball team and college basketball.
Have you ever cried at work?
That's a good question. Have I ever cried at work? The answer is yes. You may recall I told you the story of how I was taught to tell a family member that their loved one had died. It was when I was an intern in internal medicine, and my senior resident taught me that you don't give a whole lot of story. You just immediately let the person know that they passed away, and let them absorb that, and then ask questions. If you tell them everything that happened, all they hear is blah, 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 waiting to hear that last answer that they either are doing better or they died. So I had to tell a husband of a 43-year-old mother that she had passed. He thanked me for letting him know, and then asked me to tell his daughter, 16-year-old daughter. So I did. I told the 16-year-old daughter. She looked at me and said, I'm so glad you were the one to tell me, Dr. Vats, because you were my mom's favorite. And that absolutely brought tears to my eyes. So my very first case where I had to deal with a death, I definitely was brought to tears. I can vividly remember two other cases where that I was brought to tears. There was my kids are now 20 and 15, but at the time I had an 8-year-old, and an 8-year-old about the same age and size as my child came in, and the father was at the foot of the bed, and there was something about his mannerisms that reminded me of me. And so when his child died, it hit me, and I was brought to tears on that case. Even just talking to the dad, it was, the roles flipped. All of a sudden, he was comforting me. So that was a case where I was brought to tears. There was another case I recall. Two young children, a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old with a spinal cord injury. They were going to be quadriplegics for life. And so the decision was made to withdraw the life-sustaining therapies and allow them to pass naturally. It's amazing how God works. Both of them, their hearts stopped at exactly the same time. And we put them in the same room, hand in hand, put their hands together, and they both passed at the exact same moment. And that one brought me to tears as well. I actually brought a lot of folks to tears.
Hey, Dr. Vats, how do you sleep at night?
The question is, how do I sleep at night? And I will tell you that has been a struggle all my career. In medicine training, we now have duty hours. But when I was in medical school training, there were no duty hours. So sleeping was almost frowned upon. You were just supposed to keep going, keep going. My worst shift, I was up for 52 hours straight. And sleep was not given a priority. It is now. In medicine, we actually have to go through sleep hygiene lectures. I have worked with my physician to help me with sleep. I do have times when I struggle with anxiety and depression, and the job can get to you. I'll do everything I can to try to promote sleep. I do try to promote healthy sleep hygiene habits. Try to get to bed between 9:30 and 10:30 at night, and get up at a reasonable time between 6 and 7 every morning. Try to set that routine. It does get I guess off kilter when I have a bad call night, but then the second I'm off call, I do my very best to get right back to that routine.
How do you sleep at night when dealing with tragic cases?
Yeah, the question is, how do I sleep at night when I'm dealing with such emotionally tragic cases? A mentor of mine taught me this, and I loved it. Death is a part of life, and somebody has to help families get through that. And so I take pride in making sure that I do my very best to help families get through the death and dying process. But I also have lots of amazing cases where you get joy in saving kids' lives. And it's a balance. You do have to figure out how to compartmentalize it. People talk about the phases of death and dying, Kubler-Ross, the 5 phases. Families may take months and years to go through it. We as clinicians go through it as well. It may not take us, 20 months. It might take us, 20 minutes or a week or two. But we go through the same emotional turmoil. But I think that statement from my mentor who talked about how, you take pride in serving in death helps. It's a way to get a reward, a personal reward, from a devastating situation.
Have you had any funny cases at work?
Have I had any funny cases? And in an ICU, you rarely get very many funny cases. But one of the things we do in the ICU is often provide sedation, much like an anesthesiologist, for patients. And so we get some good, funny experiences when we sedate teenagers. You can get some very animated responses from them. One of the funniest was a child who said, "I bet that's not going to make me fall asleep." And I said, "I bet you a quarter." And he said, I'll take it. And of course he fell asleep. So before he actually woke up, I taped a quarter into the palm of his hand. And so he woke up and actually didn't even remember the conversation when he had the quarter in his hand. So that was kind of a funny case. But yeah, the sedation ones are the funny cases because they're usually healthier patients and I get to interact with them more. Kids who are sick in the ICU, there's usually very little interaction. They are usually on life-sustaining therapies. So the funny cases really come from the healthier kids that we provide sedation for.
If you had to choose a different career, what would it be?
If I had to choose a different career, what would I pick? Oh man, it's hard to say I would pick a different career because I absolutely love what I do. But I will say one of the things that is difficult about being a pediatric ICU doctor is that it limits your opportunities of where you can go. You have to go where there's a hospital setting. You can't just hang up a shingle and say, "I'm an ICU doc, come see me." You have to be hooked up with a hospital system to work as an ICU doc. If I could do anything different, it's a path I'm actually trying to work towards, is I'd like to become more of a healthcare leader at an administrative level so that I can, use the impact, leverage all the things that I've learned as an ICU doctor and an educator, doing process and quality improvement to try to help provide healthcare at a more system and leadership level, help to build the teams and the healthcare systems. So instead of helping patients one patient at a time, hopefully I can be helping them communities at a time.
Do you have any advice to someone who wants to follow your path?
But what advice would I give to somebody who wants to follow my path? Make sure you're passionate about it. It is a commitment. I think it was Simon Sinek who said this line, and I liked it. Working hard on something you don't enjoy is stress. Working hard on something you truly enjoy is passion. So you've got to be passionate about it. I fell into it. I was passionate about being a doctor. I didn't know what specialty I'd be passionate about, but I did. I fell in love with taking care of patients in the ICU, and I've stuck with it for nearly 30 years.
Which are the families you connect with the most?
The question is, which are the families that I connect with the most? And this may sound like very sad, but the families that I connect with the most are the ones who lose their children. I believe a lot of families, when they get in the ICU and if their child gets better and they get home, that's a horrific experience they want to forget and they want to move on. And for the families whose children die, they have to go home without their child. And so their last memory or connection for their child is the hospital. Sometimes, it could be a nurse, it could be a therapist, but sometimes it's me, the doctor, that they develop a connection with. And so maintaining a connection with me helps them in some way maintain a connection with their child that they lost. So those are the ones that are the most impactful and probably the families with whom I've become the closest.
Who's your hero and why?
Who is my hero and why? Well, this one I think my number one hero is my father. There's no doubt about that. I lost my dad in 2020, but I had a great 57-year ride with him. Most people know their parents really well up until age 18, and you go off to college and you kind of develop your own independent life. But I went off to college, and then 4 years later came to medical school, and then residency at the University of Kansas, where my father was a physician. And so I had a 7-year career where I was known as Dr. Vats' son. And then fast forward years later, my father went to take a job in Savannah where I had worked, and then my dad became known as Dr. Vats' father. So I had a wonderful 57-year ride with my dad where we were able to share a lot of things, medicine, sports, our love for cars. And so he was, without a doubt, my number one hero. Now, if I had to go beyond, one person I really admire, and it just kind of popped to mind because I have 2 of his autographed jerseys, is I've always admired Tony Gonzalez. He's an impressive guy. I followed him when he was playing basketball for Cal, and I was so glad that my Kansas City Chiefs drafted him, and he had a great career with the Chiefs. And then he decided to move to the Atlanta Falcons, which is where I live now, and so I was able to follow his career for many years. He has since then had developed a wonderful podcast that I love listening to. I recommended it for everyone. I just think he's an admirable guy, a good role model. So, I guess those are a couple of heroes. Well, first of all, thank you everyone for joining us on the very first episode of Ask Dr. Vats. This was fun. It was a great opportunity, I think, to hopefully humanize pediatric critical care medicine, or the pediatric intensive care unit. It is a scary place to be. As I often tell my friends, and Ma, you've heard me say this before, I'm the doctor you don't want to see. But if you do need to see me, I hope that I'm able to take good care of you. Not just your child, but the whole family. This was kind of a fun opportunity. I want to thank Marcio Sgulato, or Ma, for helping me set this up, and hopefully we'll be able to do this many more times to come. I would love to entertain folks' question. I don't want to come across as a medical expert and give people medical advice, but just hopefully add a human element to what is a very scary and intimidating situation. Thanks again for joining me for Ask Dr. Vats.